Hello, welcome to this ARP 2600 preset deep dive, and we're going to deconstruct this sound. I had my mod wheel set about halfway up then, and it sounded crazy. We can see several outputs coming from the mod wheel, and they're having a dramatic effect on the sound. So we'll come back to that later. It's a kind of a nice accident straight out of the gate, but by default, the mod wheel is now set down to 0. This is our basic sound. And so when we do these preset deep dives on any semi-modular synth, we need to be a little bit more careful not to just look at the cables and think, oh, that's what's going on. Because all of these jacks are live. They're all normal connections. So if sliders are turned up, something's going on, and we need to be careful about making presumptions about how this sound's being generated. So let's work backwards. We can see that we've got the VCA output, and the VCA is itself being fed by the VCF. We're taking our envelope off the AR envelope, and that's all completely standard, straightforward stuff. So now we can quite comfortably look at just the VCF to see where our tones are coming from. And of course, we've got 5 audio inputs, and 4 of them are active. So we've got a mix of multiple different sound sources. And the best way to actually figure out what each of these sound sources do is to turn 3 of them down. So if we start from the left hand side, there's no ring mod, don't have to worry about that, move on. Now VCO1 has nothing in the jack and the slider's turned up. So VCO1 is feeding some audio signal into the VCF. So that's something we're going to have to take note of. And let's turn everything else down. And so now we're just going to hear what VCO1 is doing to the sound. There's other stuff going on, but just for now, let's hear what that's doing. Okay, so we can see it's the highest setting of the pitch control. That's set to 1 octave above. Got a little bit of fine tune here, and a plus 12 semitones, so we've gone really high actually. Standard, I was about to say standard keyboard control voltage effect here, but of course we have a connection from the sequencer. So rather than it taking just its notes from the keyboard, we're hearing a sequence. And it's taking its output from quantized out A. And because we can see that there's also a quantized out B, we can suspect or infer that the sequencer is in 8/2 mode. And indeed it is. There you go. So we've got 2 different sequencer outputs. Please go back and refer to my 2 sequencer videos. There's a very deep exploration of the sequencer elsewhere. So we've got these 8 notes here being output to VCO1. It's also taking an input from the mod wheel. So it's one of the 3 destinations to which the mod wheel is patched. And so that's going to have an effect on the pitch of VCO1. And there we go. So in addition to the mod wheel doing other stuff, and we've not got there yet, it is having a fundamental effect on the pitch. If I turn this down, it'll stop doing that. Now we can hear the tonal effect the mod wheel's having on the sound, but no longer any pitch control. Turn that back up. So up to this point, we've figured out how VCO1 is making its sound, that we've got some detuning going on. It's outputting its signal to the VCF, which in turn is throwing it out to the VCA. So let's have a think now about what filter controls are being applied to the VCF to help shape the quality of that sound. Well, there are 3 of them. All 3 of these sliders are at non-zero, so they're all having some effect, and 2 of them are normal connections. So here we've got keyboard control voltage, which means that the keyboard itself is having a key follow slope effect on the filter. The higher the notes we play, there's going to be like a brighter filter sound, and the lower notes are going to be deeper. So if I play a very low note, turn this up, it gets deeper and deeper until it's basically inaudible as the key follow slope gets steeper and steeper. We cut all those high frequencies out. Similarly, up at the top of the keyboard, that's really high. Come down an octave. Just gets brighter and brighter and brighter. It's very, very common to have a key follow effect on filters, to have the higher notes be brighter than the lower notes. And that's what's going on here. We've also got the normal ADSR connection at 50%. And we've got some inputs and outputs on the ADSR, so we're going to be a little bit careful about what we're talking about here. But for now, let's just turn it down. So it's quite a significant effect on the sound. And there it is, maximized. So let's figure out how that's happening. Well, the ADSR is being fed by clocked gate 1 out. So we can see that every single gate in the sequencer, every single step is set to bus 1. So every single time the clock fires, we're going to get a gate 1 out signal from here. And that's going to be affected by the pulse width, which is set to 44%. So it's not going to allow this filter to have an effect on the tone for the entire duration of the playing of the note. We can change that. Now you can hear the notes kind of breathing for longer. If we want to hear different effects that envelope might have on the tone, we can play with the envelope itself. Let's really accentuate it. You can hear the filter trying to stay open for as long as it possibly can. Now it's open fully. Okay, very cool. So that's the effect that the clocked output driving the envelope, in turn having an effect on the VCF, and we hear that sound at the output. That's ADSR dealt with, and then we've also got this connection. Don't be fooled into reading VCO2. Oh, VCO2 is having some effect. No, it's been overridden, and it's been overridden by something in the voltage processor. So what's going on here? We have an input coming from the mod wheel. So the mod wheel is also being mixed with a triangular LFO. So let's have a think about what those two things mean when they're mixed together. If you have a modulation wheel effect, which is just a static control value determined by that wheel. If I turn it all the way down, its control voltage is effectively 0, and if I turn it all the way up, it's going to be, I don't know if it's like 0 or 1 or 10 or whatever, like, you know, nominal control voltage it outputs, but it's just a static number. That number is in turn being modulated by a triangular LFO, which is set to a very slow tempo. It's actually synced with the MIDI, but it's set to tempo divided by 8. That in turn is being output into the VCF, and its effect is maximized. So whatever this thing is doing, whatever this strip on the VCF is doing, it's doing it as much as it possibly can. So let's find out what it is doing. So we're going to have to mess with the mod wheel to hear this effect. And for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to take the pitch control out so we don't have our ears kind of polluted by that. So that's now at maximum. There's the LFO. So periodically it's brightening the sound and then dulling it down again and then brightening the sound up. And the amount that it's doing that is being controlled by the modulation wheel, and those two things are being mixed together in the voltage processor and output to this channel strip. Great stuff. So that's basically VCO1's path. We've dealt with it and brought the VCF in, and everything that we're hearing to do with VCO1 is pretty much covered by that. Let's just jump ahead and then come back again. So we've got back to the basic default sound now that this preset generates. Turn my mod wheel all the way back down again. Okay, so now let's turn VCO1 down and let's hear what VCO2 is doing to the sound. So we've turned all the other 4 sound sources down. So we can see now we're operating at 16 foot here, which is 1 octave below. No tuning, a little bit of fine tune. We've got the same quantized output coming to VCO2, so it's feeding both of these oscillators simultaneously. And then we're taking an inverted sawtooth or ramp output from the oscillator into this channel. So ordinarily VCO2 outputs its square wave or its pulse wave to this strip. Well, we've overridden that. It's now outputting this ramp, and the effect is maximized, so we're doing as much of whatever it is that we're doing as we can, and that's the sound we get. Again, this is all affected by the same VCF controls that we dealt with in VCO1. So we've got the bright sounds up here, duller sounds down here, that's accentuated by this. We've also got the enveloping effect, we've already dealt with that. And again, we've still got this modulation wheel slash triangular LFO effect being applied as well. So let's hear that. Yeah, you can hear the LFO in the background doing its thing. Note, I just turned the mod wheel up from 0 to max, and we had no change to the pitch. So that modulation wheel pitch control is only being applied to VCO1. And now that we've turned VCO1 down, we're not hearing that anymore. I'm turning the mod wheel up and down now, no effect on the sound. We're changing the LFO pattern, but that's all. And that's it for VCO2. Again, jump forwards, jump back, turn the others down. Now let's have a listen to VCO3. What's it doing? Sounds very nice. Let's have a think. What's going on? So this time we've got output B feeding into the keyboard, into this slider here, the pitch control effect. I should stop saying keyboard control voltage. It's the pitch control of VCO3. So we've got a different sequence. The original sequence is this one. But we're outputting this one. But apart from that, that's the only difference between these two channels. It's just the notes it's outputting. Everything else in the sequencer is pretty static. It's a reasonably straightforward setup down here. So VCO3, let's have a look. No offsets whatsoever. We're outputting our pulse wave into here. So ordinarily we'd have our sawtooth. We don't have our sawtooth. We have our pulse instead. We've already dealt with all the VCF effects. They're the same. And that's that one. Forwards, backwards. Now the final input is a little bit of noise, and this is a normal connection from the noise gen. It's at about 50%. There you hear all the other effects, particularly you can really hear the LFO operating against the noise there. It's really nice. So those are the 4 different tone inputs that this sound has. While we're listening to this kind of single sound, I'll just draw your attention to the fact that we've got a ton of delay on the sound. So if we have a quick look at the delay module, these are so straightforward settings. You know, we don't need to spend too long on the delay, but note it's kind of easy to get confused. The difference between delay, the repeating of the sound, and the effect, that's coming from the sequencer. It's firing the envelope into the filter and having that like filter sound, filter sweeping sound. If I turn the envelope down, we lose that effect. And now we've just got the LFO. Well, it's a triangle, isn't it? Triangularly sweeping in the background. And there's my modulation wheel turned all the way up. And now that modulation effect is at its maximum. Jump forwards, jump back to our standard sound. Got these 2 outputs coming from the ADSR, both plugging into pulse width modulation controls of VCOs 2 and 3. So let's have a look at VCO 3 first. So there, the envelope, when it fires, is hitting its maximum value more or less instantaneously and then spending 250 milliseconds decaying back down to nothing again. And over the course of that 250 milliseconds, it's modulating the width of the pulse wave being output by VCO3. Okay, VCO2's pulse wave is not connected to anything. So this slider's not doing anything. If I change this wave to a pulse wave, then it's having an effect. So if we just go back to the default patch for a moment, unless I'm missing something, that cable there is not doing anything. We'll just finish off the mod wheel. We've heard pretty much everything it's doing. We've seen one of the effects go into the pitch control of VCO1, one of them going into the voltage processor where it's being mixed with the triangular LFO to have a filtering effect, and then we've got this third connection coming up here. So this is an FM control on VCO3. Now we've not heard that because we didn't move the mod wheel when VCO3 was active, but I think we know what's going to happen. Turning the mod wheel and getting absolute madness. Very straightforward output from the AR envelope into the sequencer, gate opening the sequencer as long as the key's pressed, trigger firing the reset each time, completely basic stuff. Again, go back and have a look at the sequencer tutorials for a bit of a chat about that. And that's it, that's this preset covered. This is the situation with the 2600 presets. Stuff that looks reasonably straightforward on the surface very often has layers of depth to it, and we need to talk about lots of different controls intermixed with each other and need to be very careful not to just disconnect a cable or to turn something down and presume that you've completely nailed what that effect is doing. Each one of these oscillators, for instance, can be having multiple effects on the sound at the same time, and you need to follow every signal path to actually get a full understanding of where the composite sound is coming from. Hope that's been useful to you. Join me next time for another deep dive, and I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks very much for watching.